Part 2. The temporal lobe. So in the last week, you've probably seen the news that the Iowa State Legislature cut about $117 million in funding from the state due to budget reductions. Budget reductions were due to lower than forecasted farm revenues, which, if you think it's bad now, imagine what it's going to be like if we get in a trade war with Mexico or China. That will drastically drain our state. But in terms of those cuts, they decided that higher ed, colleges, would receive about a $20 million cut to their funding. Of that $20 million, $8 will be removed from both Iowa State, about $2 million from UNI, and another $2 million from community colleges around the state. However, they did decide not to cut any K-12 funding, which is pretty typical of our legislature. They very rarely ever make cuts to K-12 funding. But every year around budget season, we do get into the argument of how much we should increase, or should we increase, or should we decrease K-12 funding. And therein lies part of our problem. And over the last decade, K-12 schools have seen small, sometimes single percentage gains in how much funding they receive. The problem with that is that it rarely keeps up with the amount of inflation and what it costs to run the school, as well as try to maintain or enhance the schools so that kids are able to learn in the best environment possible. What that results in is bigger class sizes. A few years ago we set a goal of 17 students per teacher in a kindergarten classroom, and right now we're at 20. We've not been able to get down to that 17 number that we think is appropriate for the best learning environment at the most cost-effective savings. And we're spending money to outfit schools with modern technology, while at the same time students' desks are falling apart. Our schools are more diverse now than they've ever been. They're 23% non-white compared to 10% non-white in 2000. But our ELL funding hasn't caught up to that need, which means students are in classrooms with teachers that they can't understand. That's not fair to the student or the teacher. We need a way to fix some of these problems, and some of that requires additional funding. And it shouldn't be an argument of, well, we can have modern technology or the kids can have good desks. It needs to be both of those in order to create the best learning environment possible. If we want our kids to learn, to score well, and to make use of the dollars that we pump into our education system, then all of those components need to tie together. We owe it to the bright kids who've escaped possible death in places with civil war like Nepal to come here and learn in our classrooms in a language that they understand, as well as to learn a language that allows them to read a constitution that gives them the rights they now earn as our citizens. So while legislators haven't cut funding to Iowa schools, we haven't kept up the pace that we need to as well. We've done okay, but for Iowa, we need to decide if doing okay is the brand we want, or if we want Iowa to still be thought of as a leader in education. And I think we do, and I think we can. I mean, heck, since the beginning of time, or at least 100 years ago, Iowa spent more than the national average on its students. But since 1996, for the last 20 years, we've actually spent about 1.5% less than the nation on our students. Is there any coincidence as to why our scores have fallen over that same time? You decide. And while no cuts were made to K-12, the cuts to higher ed eventually will add up and will impact college affordability. And keeping college affordable is paramount to the success of our economy over the next 100 years. Most of the jobs that are being created are higher order thinking jobs, and they require a college education to be able to step into the job and understand the tools and the things that are happening around you so that you can write the code or build the thing or design the doodad. Whatever it might be, you can't do that out of high school. And as much as employers are willing to do on-the-job training, they're not willing to do that much on-the-job training.